Greetings, family. Welcome to the African Exodus show. I'm your host, Tierney Cherie. Before we get started with today's video, I want to remind you all, if you have not already, please do add yourself to my Telegram channel. Telegram is the app that I use to update people whenever I do a video or just want to share something with the community. So you can connect with me over there. So today we're going to talk about the state of our people inside of the Babylon system, those of us who are still in that system. Is it volatile to us? Is it good for us? Or is it a conspiracy just to keep us there? A conspiracy just to keep us physically inside of certain places in order to better control us? Now, I'm not here to lecture anyone. I'm not here to push anyone to do anything that goes against their will. I'm just here to paint a picture for you that I feel led to paint based on history and also based on where the world is going at this particular time. Historically, we know that there's never been a day where our people, African people in the United States, have been treated with dignity. We know there's never been a day where our people, African people in Europe, have been treated with dignity. And yet a lot of people feel drawn into these systems. A lot of people are leaving Africa to go over the Mediterranean inside of boats that are capsizing and falling over just because they have this beautiful idea of a world where they'll be able to join European society. A lot of lies there, obviously. But the question is, are these places designed for our good? Are they places designed for our derailment? So I actually want to give you some food for thought just from a historical example. We're going to talk about Marcus Garvey. If you do not know Marcus Garvey, who is known for starting the Back to Africa movement, he was someone who, by all accounts, as far as a white supremacist, you would think that a white supremacist would not think of him as a threat. The reason is he did not come to interfere with the politics of white society. He did not come to try to even integrate into white neighborhoods. None of that assimilationist rhetoric was coming from Marcus Garvey. He came for nationhood. He wanted African people in the United States and abroad, Caribbean, inside of the world really, to understand that our destiny was not to be subservient to someone else in their system, but was to have power in a system where we could actually have dignity and have something of our own, not relying on them, have something of our own. That was what he was teaching. That message was seen as a threat, and one should wonder why. He didn't want power for us in America. He advocated for us going home to Africa, and from there being able to truly have a realization of what power was. Yet that dream to go back to Africa, we hear many people even try to say that today. If you start complaining about the state of America, they say, you don't like America? Go to Africa, go to Africa. Well, Garvey was actually trying to organize a mass movement to go to Africa, trying to advocate for many of our people to leave this American dream behind and go to Africa where you can actually have a dream that is realized because your people are one and the same in the African continent. That's what he was teaching. Why was that a threat? That's the question I want you to ask. So let's read from a memorandum. This is from the Federal Bureau of Investigation's COINTELPRO documents. Just I want you to keep in mind that this man, again, someone who shouldn't have been a threat to the white supremacist society, was seen as a threat to them. So memorandum for Mr. Ridley, dated October 11th, 1919. I am transmitting herewith a communication which has come to my attention from the Panama Canal, Washington office, relative to the activities of Marcus Garvey. Garvey is a West Indian Negro, and in addition to his activities in endeavoring to establish the Black Star Line Steamship Corporation, he has also been particularly active among the radical elements in New York City in agitating the Negro movement. Unfortunately, however, he has not yet violated any federal law whereby he could be proceeded against on the grounds of being an undesirable alien from the point of view of deportation. It occurs to me, however, from the attached clippings that there might be some proceedings against him for fraud in connection with his Black Star Line propaganda, and for this reason I am transmitting a communication to you for all appropriate attention. He is the founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and the African Communities League, and he is the promulgator of the Black Star Line and is managing editor of the Negro World. He is an exceptionally fine orator, creating much excitement among the Negroes through his steamship proposition. In his paper, The Negro Road, the Soviet-Russian rule is upheld, and there is one open avocation of Bolshevism. So this is the memorandum that was sent to J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover, who has been said to say that the greatest threat to American society is Black unity. Question is for you, why did they feel that way? What about us going to Africa? What about us getting away from America? What about that was such a threat to people who supposedly didn't want us there to begin with, didn't want us amongst them in politics, didn't want us trying to form militia groups, didn't want us arming ourselves, didn't want us exercising our rights? How is it possible that these people who supposedly did not want us there really were so afraid of a man who was advocating for us to peacefully leave the United States and go to the African continent? How is that possible? Well, I want you to consider an example from Scripture. So we're going to read through Exodus 10, 3 through 7. So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said to him, "This is what Yahuwah, the God of the Hebrews, says. How long will you refuse to let my people go? Behold, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your territory. They will cover the surface of the land, so that no one will be able to see the land. They will also eat the rest of what has survived, what is left to you from the hail. And they will eat every tree of yours which grows in the field. Then your houses will be filled with them, together with the houses of all your servants and the houses of all the Egyptians. Something which neither you nor your fathers nor your grandfathers has ever seen from the day that they came upon the earth until this day." And he turned and left Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh's servants said to him, "How long will this man be a snare to us? Let the people go, so that they may serve Yahuwah their God. Do you not yet realize that Egypt is destroyed?" However, we know that that was not enough to Pharaoh to let the people go, because Pharaoh's heart was still hardened against Yah's people. I say this and bring up this example to say that Pharaoh would rather have destroyed the Israelites, would have rather have seen them wiped away from the planet, rather than just simply let them go. What does that tell you about this same spirit that operates in the American empire? It tells us that this spirit is one that does not want to let us go. The reason is because they see us as being more powerful if we are not under their regime. They see us as being more of a threat if we're not under their authority. The biggest example of this is obviously during the movement, the Black Power movement, when you see different people who were talking domestically. You've seen Malcolm X talking domestically. You've seen Martin Luther King talking domestically. You see so many of our liberation leaders talking domestically, Kwame Ture. Whenever they were talking domestically, that was one thing. But when these people started going abroad, when these people started going to other countries, when these people started being involved with other movements, with people who thought similarly, all of a sudden, these people who were all about domestic at one time, but now they're trying to branch out into the international realm. All of a sudden, these people become a threat, particularly when these people would go to Africa, when they would go to the African continent, when they would meet African independence leaders, movement leaders, when they would commune with those people, and they would talk about the commonality of struggle. Why was that such a threat? It's because that threat of us not being under their control in America is something that they have actively worked to derail, and they still do so today. Now, to be clear, I have no interest in whether or not each individuals are people, whoever you are. I don't have a personal interest in where you go or what you do. I do, however, want us to realize that the empires that we live under are in the business of keeping us under control, and they'll put certain movements out there in order to do that, such as Black Lives Matter. They'll put certain images out there. They'll put certain depictions of ourselves out there. They'll put institutions in place like a prison industrial complex. They'll put institutions in place like the education system. They'll put all of these things in place because they don't want to see you go anywhere outside of their borders, and they want you to stay right there And they want you, while you're here, to be in such a depressed state that they can ensure you will never reach your true potential, which you can only find in Yah. The other thing that you should keep in mind about this is that they understand you are a threat to them when you're out of their dominion. You're a threat to them when you're with your brothers and sisters in the continent, because you can stir up a certain spirit, having received the same oppression that we've all received. Don't take my word for it, though. Let's look at some statistics. The Black mortality gap in a century-old document. Black Americans die at a higher rate than white Americans at nearly every stage. 2019, the most recent year with available mortality data, shows that there are over 62,000 such earlier deaths, one out of every 5 African American deaths. The age group most affected by the inequality was infants. Black babies were more than twice as likely than white babies to die before their first birthday. Let's just let that resonate for a moment. The overall mortality disparity has existed for centuries. Racism drives some of the key social determinants of health, like lower levels of income and generational wealth, less access to healthy food, water in public spaces, environmental damage, overpolicing, disproportionate incarceration, and the stresses of prolonged discrimination. I want to talk about each of these different scenarios because each of them have a commonality. It says the drivers of racism are lower levels of income and generational wealth, okay, dependency basically on the system, less access to healthy food, dependency on the system because you depend on them for food, water in public spaces, dependency on the system, you depend on them for water, environmental damage, you depend on them for the environment, overpolicing, you depend on them for protection, disproportionate incarceration, you are imprisoned by them inside of the prison industrial complex, and the stresses of prolonged discrimination because you're not being let into their world, something else, you depend on them having an oblivion towards you. But the healthcare system also plays a part in this disparity. Research shows that Black Americans receive less and lower quality of care for conditions like cancer, heart problems, pneumonia, pain management, prenatal and maternal health, and overall preventative care. During the pandemic, this racial longevity gap seemed to grow again after narrowing in recent years. The pandemic in particular, I brought this point up inside of a previous video. What explanation could there possibly be that third world countries were bearing better than us in the West under this pandemic? How is it possible that those who have all the access to all of the healthcare sources in the world, yet those of us who are not inside of that system are doing better? That's because racism is a choker. It's a killer, particularly us. We did the worst in the pandemic, understand? And that racism, it kicks in. It really does kick in as far as lowering your prospects for life. This is not to say that the healthcare situation is perfect in every country, perfect abroad, but it is to just bring up a question that I think is valid. How is it possible that we are suffering more whenever we leave the United States than whenever we're inside of one of the premier first world countries? How is it that we suffer more inside of every single institution, despite the fact that we are the ones that built that country? How is it possible that still we are having the same amount of property, the same amount of home ownership, the same amount of education, the same amount of disparities on every single level as we have had for at least the last 50, 60, 70 years, despite the fact that we supposedly are so post-racial inside of America? Now, America, I understand, has figured out how to deal with our people. They figured out how to turn us against each other. They figured out how to control us by divide and conquer. And the reason why you continue to see messages encouraging discontent with African brothers and sisters abroad is because there is a real incentive to see that divide and not see that connection, not see people who are looking elsewhere outside of that system, not see people who are looking to be separate from that system. Again, the whole part of this segment, the whole theme of this segment is being set apart, coming out of the system, leaving the system, which has to happen obviously mentally, spiritually, but I think also physically, you have to make moves to get yourself out of this position of dependency on a system that is adverse to you. That's common sense and survival. For some reason, when you talk about this, people will look at you like you're crazy. How dare you speak like this? But this is a survival mechanism. When you understand abuse is coming from an individual, it's insanity. to expect that individual to change. It's insanity to keep going to them for help. So I just wanted to bring this issue up as far as our unity, as far as our return to the motherland, the Holy Land. Hopefully that will be some food for thought for you. But I thank you all for watching. I will see you all in the next
How
video.
you design those programs. In all of the programs that I attended, all of the education that I had, college, public, and otherwise, nobody ever told me that I was an African woman. Nobody ever told me what the history of African people were. Nobody ever told me that America is business, and without business you will have nothing and be nothing. And nobody ever told me how to organize business so that I would be able to develop institutions in my own community. So now the sincerity of all of the programs and all of the education has to be questioned, indicted, and convicted, because the bottom line is that America is not and has never tried to produce African adults who are functional, self-sufficient, who understand their politics, their economics, and their relationship to the world politics and the world economics.
America is satisfied with the NAACP, the Urban League, and the traditional we shall overcome civil rights leaders of the 50s and 60s that have been all but abandoned and ignored by younger people, Sister Souljah included.
I think that the dice are loaded, and that's what's left out of Mr. Brown's piece. See, there was a period of time in this country after Reconstruction where African people owned a lot of land, owned a lot of businesses, and did a lot of things. But what happened was the American government, the Ku Klux Klans, and other organizations organized in smashing that effort. So it's not that we haven't tried to own lands and have not organized businesses. It's that if you are African in America, or in Latin America, or in the Caribbean, or in the continent, you will be hunted no matter what you do, because they do not want us to survive and become self-sufficient. And you can say no, but you haven't lived this life. You haven't lived this life.
Listen, to be happy. I'm talking about that. All right. Now, to paraphrase Senator Bradley of New Jersey, the state from which your piece was.
Senator Bradley gets much right when he talks.
He does, and he, among other things, and he's not claiming to be particularly original with the observation, we can't get there unless we go together. I have a terrible feeling that behind me are some people who do not agree.
Senator Bradley of the all-white United States Senate said we can't get there unless we all go there together. Sorry, none of us are where he is. That's number one. Number two, you're making a moral appeal to a country that doesn't have a moral conscience. The question becomes that when white people feel serious and angry and upset about abortion, they come out in the thousands up to the millions to say, this is what we believe about abortion. Where is the white outcry against white racism that murders African people all around this entire globe? It doesn't exist. So who are these white good people? I want to meet them. I want to see them. It was not enough.
But that might be all we can give.
No. And guess what? I don't work with all I can get. What I work with is what I have. Listen, you have to have some confidence in the power of African people amongst ourselves to establish a foundation. We haven't. We have utter chaos in our cities, and you've got to say that. You can have a program. I'm not saying we've built a lot of institutions, and those institutions have not been effective. The majority of millions of African youth in this country are dying mentally, dying spiritually, dying emotionally, dying academically. And you may have a program, Mr. Brown may have a program, but what we got to talk about is an American government that tracks millions of African people who don't go to your program, don't go to Brown's program. Millions of African people, not only here, but all around the world. And if we are not honest enough to say who are our friends, who are our enemies, to know what a friend is, to know what an enemy is, we will constantly be trying to get into people's parties, to shake our butts with them, to get them to like us, and that's not the question. The question is, what can we build amongst ourselves to secure ourselves from our enemies so that we will be able to survive into the future?
Mayor Kelly.
It's enough to know that if I walk out Washington, D.C. tonight, some black kid in Washington, D.C. is blowing off another black kid's head for repairing sneakers because the institutions that we're talking about, not the things that we hold up to say, look, this is one example. The institutions that we're talking about are not saving the minds of those African children. That is the honest truth. You have, none of these Negroes saved me. None of these Negroes saved me. None of them. Listen, you know who saved me? A man named John Desane in Inglewood, New Jersey, who told me who I was, who showed me my history, who told me who my enemies were, who let me know that this was not an easy world, who let me know that this was a cold environment, who let me know what he's not a part of is dilly-dallying with the minds of African children and letting them know what the real situation is in America.